What I'm about to tell you is simply unbelievable. A man in broad daylight walking as usual, and suddenly the impossible happens. The sky tears open, the wind turns into a hurricane, and from the midst of the clouds, a chariot of fire descends at high speed. The ground shakes, flames devour the air, and before anyone can blink, he is taken gone, disappeared without a trace. No warning, no illness, no death. He was simply taken up to heaven. Now tell me, what kind of person vanishes like this? What kind of man is so remarkable, so powerful, so connected to the supernatural, that even death cannot touch him? And more, could this happen again? Because this story is not just about the past. It may be closer to your reality than you think. If you think you've seen it all, get ready, because what I'm about to reveal could change the way you see the world. The only question that matters is, if this happened today, would you be ready? Imagine a man who appears out of nowhere, without warning, without allies, without fear, a stranger from the desert, dressed simply, but with a voice that can shake thrones. He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't beat around the bush. He simply faces the most wicked king Israel has ever seen, and declares it will not rain. Not today, not tomorrow, not next month, only when I say so. And then silence, the skies close. The earth cracks, water disappears. Chaos begins. Who is this madman who dares to declare a drought over an entire nation? Elijah, an ordinary man carrying something no one else had, the authority of God himself. Now imagine the panic, the king, the priests, the people, all witnessing the unknown prophecy coming true. Day after day, Baal, the god of rain whom they so adored, did nothing. Prayers to false gods echoed in vain. But Elijah, he vanished, disappeared like thunder after a lightning strike, leaving behind a kingdom crumbling under drought and famine. He came, delivered the prophecy, and left. But don't think that was his last act, because when he returned, fire would fall from the sky. And now I ask you, what makes a man challenge a king, an empire, an entire nation? What gives someone the courage to declare a collapse and simply disappear? This isn't normal. This isn't human. This is something greater. Elijah wasn't just a prophet. He was a living sign that God still ruled over everything. And if this story has already intrigued you, wait until you see what happens next, because the fire hasn't even begun to fall. Elijah disappeared in the fire. But what if I told you he never really left? Centuries earlier, it was written he would return before the great and terrible day of the Lord. But how he was taken up, carried to heaven in a flaming chariot. How could someone who left in such a way reappear? This wasn't just a prophecy. It was a warning. Something great was coming. Something that would change everything. Elijah was a sign in the past, but he is also a key to the future. And if you think this story is over, you're very mistaken. The Jews expected Elijah to return. Time passed, kings changed, empires fell, until suddenly a man appeared in the desert. Rough clothing and intense gaze, words sharp as blades, John the Baptist. He didn't perform miracles. He didn't seek applause. But his voice shook the foundations of the world. His message, prepare yourselves, and then the shock. Jesus said that John came in the spirit of Elijah. Elijah had already returned, but few realized it, few understood it, and those who ignored it sealed their own fate. Now stop and think. If Elijah returned before Christ's first coming, what does that mean for today? Could his voice still be echoing, warning that something even greater is about to happen? And what if it's true? If Elijah was assigned before, what might be happening right now, right before our eyes? The question isn't whether you believe it, but whether you're paying attention. Because one thing is certain, when Elijah appears, history changes, and those who don't see it will feel its impact. Now imagine a scene. King Ahab climbs into his chariot, pulled by the fastest horses in the kingdom, cutting through the winds of the approaching storm. Lightning crosses the sky, thunder explodes on the horizon, and then something impossible happens. Elijah, without a horse, without resources, with nothing but the fire of God inside him, takes off in a supernatural sprint. He doesn't just keep up with the royal chariot. He overtakes it, yes. He outruns galloping horses, covering nearly 30 kilometers with a strength that doesn't come from this earth. This isn't human, this isn't normal. This is something much greater. It makes you wonder what propelled Elijah. It wasn't just physical endurance. It was intentional. When God gives a mission, He provides the means. Elijah didn't run to impress anyone. He ran because he knew he had to get there. The problem is, so many people today are running after everything except what truly matters. They spend energy on things that don't bring life, exhaust themselves chasing what doesn't build them up, wear themselves out trying to reach places that were never their destination. Elijah didn't waste his strength. Every step was guided. Every breath had a purpose. And you, where you run into. Because the question isn't just about running, it's about running in the right direction. Elijah reached his destination because he was aligned with something greater than himself. Now look at your own life. What is driving you? Fear, anxiety, or have you yet to discover the strength that can take you beyond what you imagine? Elijah didn't have wings, but he flew across the earth. And when God sets someone to run, no chariot can keep up, but the question remains, are you ready for the speed? Now pay attention. King Ahab wants Elijah dead. The drought has turned the land to dust. There's no food, no water, and anyone else in his place would have collapsed from hunger. But Elijah is being fed from heaven. That's right in the middle of the desert, isolated with no one around. Ravens, yes, birds that usually steal food, start bringing him bread and meat twice a day. Do you realize what that means? While kings and noble suffered the effects of the drought, Elijah ate without lifting a finger. Who else has ever been sustained like this? Who else can say that God Himself commanded creation to serve them? This isn't normal, this is supernatural. But hold on, suddenly, even the brook where Elijah drank dries up. Now anyone else would panic. But Elijah, God already had a plan. He sent the prophet to a city where a widow was about to prepare her last meal before dying of hunger with her son. And what does Elijah do? He asked her to give him food first. Doesn't that sound insane? But with the request came a promise. If you do this, your flour will not run out, and your oil will never dry up. And guess what? While everyone else starved, that woman saw the impossible happen. What was supposed to last one day, she sustained her house for months. Now answer me, how many times have you panicked thinking you were going to lack? How many times have you looked at the situation and said there's no way out? Elijah didn't survive because of what he saw, but because of what he believed. He didn't trust in what he had, but in who sustained everything. And you will. You keep chasing after things that might be gone tomorrow. Or have you understood that true provision comes from another place? Because if God sustained Elijah in the middle of the desert and multiplied what was insignificant in that widow's house, what can He do in your life? But the real question is, are you ready to trust at that level? Or will you keep thinking that everything depends only on you? Now imagine this. The boy is there lifeless. His body is already cold. The mother, who had just witnessed the miracle of provision, is now in utter despair. Why did God save me from hunger only to take my son now? Her cries tear through the silence of the house. The pain is unbearable. Elijah faces the scene, feels the weight of a loss, but he does not accept it. It cannot end like this. He takes the dead boy in his arms and climbs the stairs. And now what can a man do against death? Absolutely nothing. But Elijah is not alone in the room. He throws himself over the child's body once, nothing twice, silence 3 times, and then he cries out to heaven, Lord, bring this child's life back. Seconds that feel like an eternity, and then the child's chest moves. Air fills his lungs again. The boy opens his eyes. Death has been defeated. Can you imagine that the impossible simply became reality before that mother's eyes? Elijah comes down the stairs and places her living son in her arms. She trembles, she cries, she can barely believe it. And all that comes out of her mouth is, now I know the God you serve is the true God. Now tell me, how many things in your life have you already declared dead? How many buried dreams How many opportunities have you let slip away because you thought there was no way back? Elijah showed us something that defies everything. When God enters the story, even death loses control. And if God can resurrect a lifeless body, what else can he do? Is what you think is over really over? Or is it like that boy, just waiting for a cry to breathe again? But the real question is, do you have the courage to believe in the impossible, or will you keep burying what can still live? Now imagine this: a man alone against a raging crowd. 850 prophets of Baal and Asherah, backed by the cruelest queen Israel had ever seen. The entire nation is watching. The king is present, the atmosphere is heavy. Elijah stares at them all without flinching and throws down the challenge. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow Baal. Silence, no one answers. Then Elijah proposes the impossible. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, but no fire. The true God will answer with fire from heaven. Now there's no turning back. The truth will be exposed and the lie will be destroyed. The scene is bizarre. The prophets of Baal go into a trance. They dance, they scream, they cut themselves, spilling blood on the altar. Hours pass. The sun burns their backs. Nothing, not even a spark. Baal did not answer. Baal never answered. And Elijah, he watches everything and mocks. Shout louder. Maybe Baal went for a walk. Who knows? Maybe he fell asleep. The silence is humiliating. Their deception is exposed before everyone. Now it's Elijah's turn. He approaches the altar and pours water over the sacrifice. A lot of water until everything is soaked. And then, with a single prayer, the unthinkable happens. The sky opens. A column of fire falls like lightning. The flame consumes everything. The sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and even the water. The impossible happen. Before the eyes of the entire nation, the people fall to the ground terrified and cry out, "The Lord is God, the Lord is God." What ended was a deception. The fire burned alive. Now look at your life. How many times have you placed your faith in something that never answered? Money, fame, success. But on the day of crisis, all was silent. Elijah knew there is only one God who answers with fire. And the question that remains is, do you need to see the fire fall to believe? Or have you already realized that it's time to make a choice? Imagine the sky closed for 3 and 2 years. The land dry, cracked like an open wound. Animals dying, children crying from thirst. Crops reduced to dust. The entire kingdom feels the weight of the drought that Elijah had announced. But then on Mount Carmel, after the fire falls from heaven and consumes the sacrifice, Elijah does something unexpected. He kneels, places his face between his knees and begins to pray. And what happens next is nothing less than a spectacle of faith and persistence. Elijah sends a servant to look at the sky once. Nothing, twice, nothing. 6 times, and still nothing. But Elijah does not give up. On the 7th time, the servant returns and says, "There is a small cloud the size of a man's hand. Rising from the sea, a small cloud, something insignificant to human eyes, but a giant sign for those who believe." Elijah immediately tells Ahab, "Hurry, because a great rain is coming." And before anyone could question it, the sky that was once like bronze now darkens. Thunder roars and a torrential rain falls, washing the land and the hearts of Israel. Now think about this. How many times have you given up on the 6th attempt? How many times have you seen only a small cloud and decided it wasn't enough? Elijah teaches us that no matter how small the sign is, if God promised it, the flood is coming. But will you be able to see the rain before it arrives? Will you be able to see the miracle in the small cloud? Because sometimes what seems small and insignificant is the beginning of a downpour that will transform everything around you. The real question is, are you ready to keep looking to the sky until the rain falls now? Imagine this: Elijah has just shattered the religious system of Israel. Fire fell from heaven. The lie of the false gods was exposed. The rain returned after years of drought. He won, but then a message arrives that changes everything. Jezebel, the most wicked queen in history, sends a message filled with hatred. May the gods kill me if by this time tomorrow you are still alive. This wasn't just a threat. It was a death sentence now. Tell me, what would you expect from Elijah? That he would challenge Jezebel, that he would laugh in the face of danger, that he would confront this demonic woman? No, Elijah runs. Yes, the man who killed an army of false prophets, who called fire from heaven, who saw miracles with his own eyes, is now running to save his own life. And not only does he flee, he reaches the desert, collapses to the ground and makes a shocking prayer. Lord, it's enough. Take my life. How is that possible? The same Elijah who called down fire now wants to die. The same man who saw God transform reality before his very eyes is now drowning in fear, exhaustion, depression. Do you know what that means? That even the strongest fall, that even those with faith tremble, that even those who've seen the impossible happen may, at some point, feel drained, powerless and hopeless. And if this happened to Elijah, why do you think it would never happen to you? But here comes the most powerful part. God does not abandon him. God does not judge him. God does not condemn him. Instead, he sends an angel. Yes, Elijah is at rock bottom, and instead of being discarded, God touches him and says, "Get up and go," because the journey is still long. Now pay attention. How many times have you wanted to give up? How many times have you thought you couldn't handle it? But if God is still keeping you standing, it's because your story is not over yet. The only question that remains is, will you stay down, or will you get up to see what is yet to come? Now imagine this. Elijah, the prophet of fire, the man who challenged kings, is hiding. Yes, he won on Mount Carmel, but now he is in a cave alone, exhausted and weak. The same man who saw fire fall from heaven now wants to disappear, but then God arrives. And when God arrives, the impossible happens. Suddenly a violent wind tears through the mountain. Rocks shatter, a deafening roar. Elijah covers his face, trembling. But God was not in the wind. Next, a brutal earthquake shakes everything. The ground cracks, the earth trembles. Chaos erupts, but God was not in the earthquake. And then fire flames devour everything around. Intense heat takes over, but God was not in the fire. And then silence, no noise. The chaos dissolves, and in the midst of that emptiness, a whisper, soft, gentle, almost imperceptible. And in that moment, Elijah understands God was in that. Not in the spectacle, not in the destruction, not in the noise, but in the silence. God did not come to impress him. He came to reveal himself deeply. And that was the greatest revelation of Elijah's life. God speaks, but not always as we expect. Now pay attention. How many times have you expected God to speak? With a loud noise, with glaring signs, with something that shakes everything around you? What if he is already speaking in the silence? What if you are so focused on the chaos that you don't notice the whisper? Elijah expected something grand, but God manifested in the calm. And now I ask you, could it be that what you need is not in the spectacle, but in the silence you are too afraid to hear? Because if God is still speaking, the only question is, are you listening? Now pay attention to this. Elisha is there living his routine, plowing the land with 12 pairs of oxen. A normal day, a normal job, a normal life, but then something unexplainable happens. Elijah appears out of nowhere, walks up to him without saying a single word, and suddenly throws his mantle over him, and then just leaves no explanation, no speech, no details. And now what does Elisha do? He could ignore it, he could think about it, he could wait, but no, he feels the weight of it. He understands the call, and at that very moment, without hesitation, he runs after Elijah. But hold on to this before following Elijah. Elisha does something radical. He looks at everything he had built up to that day and destroys it. He burns the plow, kills the oxen, prepares a feast and gives it to the people. This is not a simple farewell. This is a declaration. Elisha left no escape routes, no plan B. He kept nothing behind because he knew there was an O. Turning back, the decision was final. When the call came, he didn't think twice. He simply threw himself headfirst into the unknown. Now I ask you, What if God had already thrown a mantle over your life? Would you have the courage to leave everything and run? Or would you stay stuck in the past? In comfort, in fear, Elisha teaches us something shocking. When God calls, there is an middle ground. Either you burn your plan B and dive in completely, or you miss the opportunity to live something greater. So, what is still holding you back? Because when God calls you, the question is not whether He has something great for you. The question is, do you have the courage to burn the past and step into what you were truly born to be? Elijah is walking, but he knows this is his last day on earth. Not because he will die, and Elijah will not see death like any other man. Something that has never happened before and will never happen again is about to explode before the eyes of his disciple. Elisha, they walk together, cross the Jordan, and suddenly the heavens begin to stir. The wind tears through the air. The atmosphere changes. Something supernatural is approaching. And then, without warning, the heavens open from the midst of the clouds. A chariot of fire descends like lightning. Flaming horses race through the air. The flames dance around, consuming everything with a celestial glow. The ground trembles, the wind howls, and in the blink of an eye, Elijah is taken up, yes. He does not die, he is not buried. He is taken alive, enveloped in fire. Straight to heaven, Elisha watches everything in shock, shouting, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. But Elijah is already gone. Gone, never seen again. Never found. He disappeared into glory like no one before or after. Now stop and think. Elijah lived such an intense life, so full of God's power, that even death could not touch him. Now I ask you and you, will you go through this life just anyway? Or will you leave a mark that echoes through eternity? Elijah set his generation on fire and was taken by heaven and flames. And you living for something greater? Or are you wasting your days? Because one thing is certain. When your time is up, you either rise or you are left behind. The choice is yours. Now pay attention to this. Elijah is gone. The chariot of fire took Israel's greatest prophet to heaven, and Elisha is there alone. His master is gone. The ground feels like it has vanished beneath his feet. But then something falls from the sky. Elijah's mantle, the symbol of anointing, authority, and calling. Elisha holds the fabric, feeling the weight of responsibility. And now, is he ready? Is the God of Elijah with him, or will he just be a spectator of someone else's glory? Without hesitation, he walks to the Jordan, the same river he crossed with Elijah just moments ago. But now it's different. Now he must take the initiative. He holds the mantle, wraps it in his hand, looks at the river, and then does the impossible. With a strike, he hits the water and cries out with authority, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" Silence. The wind blows the heavens watch. And then the unbelievable happens. The Jordan splits before him. The same God who parted the waters for Elijah now responds to Elisha. No more doubts. The anointing has been transferred. The calling is now his. Now stop and think. Elisha didn't wait for a sign, didn't stand still, didn't lament. He acted. How many times have you had an opportunity, a calling, a mantle falling before you, and just waited for something to happen? The Jordan only parts for those who have the courage to strike. The waters Elisha teaches us a shocking truth. The power is already available, but it only manifests for those who have faith to use it now. Tell me, are you going to keep waiting, or will you pick up the mantle and take possession of what is already yours? Elijah was already gone, but his voice still resonated through time. He didn't just prophesy, he declared the fate of Ahab and Jezebel. The corrupt king and the most ruthless queen in history thought they could mock God, that they could stay in control, that they could rule without consequences. But when God issues a decree, it may take time, but when it arrives to destroy. And now, Elijah's prophecy was about to be fulfilled. With terrifying accuracy, first Ahab, the man who lied, stole, and killed to seize the vineyard of an innocent man, falls in the very place he stained with his greed. His blood now spreads, and the dogs, the same dogs that licked Naboth's blood, now lick the blood of the king himself. exactly as Elijah had said. But Jezebel still thought she was in charge. When she heard that JEO was coming to end her reign, what did she do? She painted her face, fixed her hair, and went to the window, still believing she was untouchable. But then JEO looks up and shouts, "Who is with me?" Servants appear, and with a single command, throw her down. Jezebel falls. Her body is shattered on the ground. The dogs devour her flesh, and when they try to bury her, only the skull, hands, and feet remain, exactly as Elijah had prophesied. Now pay attention. Elijah was not just a prophet. He was a landmark, a sign that no one escapes God's justice. Ahab tried to deceive Jezebel, tried to defy, but when the time comes, there is no hiding place. And now I ask you, how many people think they can do whatever they want without consequences? How many believe that God is not watching? Elijah showed us that God may wait, but when the sentence comes, it comes with force. The question is, will you be on the right side when judgment falls? And now what will you do with all of this? Because hearing this story is one thing, but understanding what it means for your life is another. Elijah was not an ordinary prophet. He didn't live on autopilot. He set his generation on fire, challenged an empire, and was taken up in a chariot of fire. But now let me tell you what, if this is closer than you think, the world is ruined, the signs are everywhere. The clock is ticking, and while many are distracted, thinking everything is normal, something great is about to happen. And the most important question is, if heaven opened today, would you be ready? Elijah was taken because he lived intensely, because he burned for something greater. And you just living another day? Or are you leaving a mark on eternity? Because one thing I can guarantee, when the fire falls again, there will be an second chance. Now I want to hear from you. Did this video open your eyes? Do you believe the supernatural can still happen? Comment below, share this with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel because there is much more coming and you can't miss it.